Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and have the opportunity to talk to you this morning, just to set out the direction of government's construction policy over the next few years and talk about some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities that we face. So, construction as a sector has some well-known challenges. Firstly, it faces a demographic crunch with a third of the construction workforce aged over 50 at a time when populations around the world are aging. It's not just a British problem, it's not just a European problem, it's a North American problem increasingly. It's an Asian problem as well. And the demographic figures clearly show that the UK is not going to be able to replace the number of workers that it is likely to lose to retirement over the next 10 years by recruiting younger people, which has typically been the solution that it has adopted over the past couple of centuries, not just the past couple of decades. Construction also suffers from poor productivity. Again, this is a global challenge. There isn't really a construction sector in the world that is an exemplar in terms of its productivity performance. And the graph at the top there really just illustrates this point in the UK. You have every other sector, you have the whole economy average, and then you have construction bumping along at the bottom because it is labour intensive and inefficient. It creates a lot of waste, and the complexity and the information and coordination failures that occur within the construction supply chain mean that we find that we're often remediating work, or we face other problems when activities are being undertaken on site. Climate change is another huge challenge that the industry faces. We talk a lot about achieving net zero carbon by 2050, but the really challenging target for this industry and every other sector is achieving a 68% reduction on the 1990 carbon emissions baseline by 2030 and the 78% reduction by 2035. And this has really significant implications for the construction industry, as the Climate Change Committee has identified several areas or issues that the built environment has to manage if it is going to contribute to achieving the trajectory that they have set, particularly decarbonising heat and reducing energy consumption in buildings. And then finally, the challenge that we face is around costs, and particularly now in the current climate of high inflationary pressures. The budget that was announced yesterday did allocate some additional funding for things such as levelling up, capital allowances to encourage investment, which will benefit some of the manufacturers in the room. But nevertheless, inflation and the increased cost of servicing the national debt is putting an awful lot of pressure on public sector budgets as well as private sector budgets. So the amount of construction work that we can afford is going to decline unless we find ways of doing this much more efficiently and much more productively. So government has, for the last 5 or 6 years, been really focused on trying to transform this industry through the construction sector deal, various strategies including transforming infrastructure performance and the second version of that, the roadmap to 2030, and then finally through things like the construction playbook. And what we are working towards is a vision for the built environment, which is very different to the way in which we've tried to manage it in the past, where effectively we've almost let it grow organically and just simply allowed it to develop according to whatever economic or social drivers exist. We are trying now to move to a policy approach where we have a much clearer and more logical systems-based approach to thinking about the built environment, starting with the societal outcomes that we're aiming to achieve, in this case the UN Sustainable Development Goals, sitting below that, the policies that we want to enact in order to be able to deliver those objectives, how these influence the decisions that are taken at various different levels, whether it's in relation to the management of services, the management of the built environment and investment in assets, networks and systems, or whether it's managing its interactions with the natural environment. So what we're trying to do is move from a very laissez-faire approach to one that's based on systems thinking, and really where we see the built environment as a complex system of systems that needs to be actively managed in this way. And of course the common thread that links all of these things together, the objectives, the processes, the decision-making mechanisms, and the decisions that are being taken about assets, as well as the management of the supply chain that delivers those, is digitisation, which is something that we need to embed across the industry. And this is really how this slide just illustrates how we see the principles that we're trying to set out in the vision for the built environment influencing how we move and adopt to an approach where we use modern methods of construction and particularly product platforms as the default mechanism for the delivery of government projects and programmes. So what you see here is at the top you still have that clear line of sight to the societal outcomes, but then you have the policy measures that you need in place, whether it's a consolidated, harmonised pipeline where we've identified the opportunities for synergies between different building types, a rule set, and in our case it's the platform rule book that we use in the design of the component parts of those built assets, a catalogue of parts that are digitally designed, and then you actually have a manufacturing base and a construction supply chain that's geared to produce these using high quality advanced manufacturing processes, and a construction industry that's much better at managing logistics, production, the digitisation of the assets, and doing much more work off-site with only the minimum work, principally assembly, actually being done on-site. And we tried to set a clear direction of travel towards this end state in some of our recent policy documents, particularly the construction playbook, which highlighted the presumption of off-site that was originally put in transforming infrastructure performance strategy, but here where we start explicitly referencing modern methods of construction and the platform-based approach, and also where we've taken steps to actually identify across government programmes the extent to which we think we can use platform-based approaches to deliver the products and the assets that we want, where we think we're talking around about 15 to 20 billion is the amount of investment, the procurement opportunity that is going to exist for businesses in this sector. And just to quickly run through some of the policies that we've put in place which will guide construction procurement. We have the playbook, the value toolkit, the digital data and technology playbook, and then to link these up with the objectives that we're trying to achieve, the social value framework. And these documents and the policies that they're set out in them have some objectives that we are trying, well, some consistent objectives that we're trying to achieve. Firstly, in terms of productivity, looking at increasing the use of digital design, so BIM, rapid engineering modelling, and then ultimately a move to object libraries and configurators for design processes, the industrialisation of construction and the move to manufacturing built assets, and then increasingly looking at what we can do to automate and robotise operations, firstly in factories, but also looking at things like connected and autonomous plant on construction sites. And then in terms of skills, big investments in digital capability, project management, logistics management, the skills that the industry will need to do things differently. And also, as well as skills, looking at the behavioural and the cultural components of that. It's not just about people being functionally competent, it's about their ability to work effectively and interact with others as part of a team and have that wider understanding of the built environment and the systems that comprise it. And then we're also looking to improve operations through supply chain integration, the logistics, payment and contractual management, digitising assets to optimise their operation and ensure that they can exchange information and interact effectively with other assets. And then probably most importantly, it's driving this cultural change within the industry, encouraging greater collaboration, greater transparency within the supply chain operations and other things, better information flows within supply chains, a relentless focus on quality through value-based procurement, management systems and looking at how we prevent defects, learning from the experience of the manufacturing sector. And then post-Grenfell, obviously, building safety with the golden thread of building safety information, which is simply going to become the gold standard to which most projects are undertaken, regardless of whether or not they're a high-risk residential building, simply because this is going to drive better and more sustainable outcomes across whole categories of built assets, improved site environments, and then also greater investment in the occupation and mental health of the construction workforce. In an era where demographics are changing, we need to be prepared to invest more in ensuring that people can work for longer and be healthier while they are doing it. And the construction industry can make use of their skills and expertise for longer periods of time, rather than seeing people a bit like players for a football club where they're a disposable asset and ultimately you buy and sell them as you need to. The industry needs to change its culture and focus on the people and making this a really rewarding industry to build and stay in for your entire career. And then I'd just like to conclude by highlighting some of the examples where we have been trying to put the vision and some of the policies into practice, and how this is already starting to influence the procurements and the projects that we're undertaking within government. Anil mentioned the seismic product platform, which you can see the building here today. This is something that we supported through the Transforming Construction Challenge, through a couple of investment in R&D projects, a demonstration project, and through a lot of investment in the Construction Innovation Hub. It uses standardised and precision manufactured components to create a building that's 75% quicker to deliver than traditional on-site construction. We think it will deliver a 70% saving in whole life carbon emissions through reduced waste and heat and energy performance, and 90% of the building, certainly the frame, can be recycled at this point. So we are looking at the whole life cycle of the building and ensuring that it is much more sustainable than traditional construction. And when you think that 6 years ago in 2017, when we were designing the Transforming Construction Challenge, this really was a concept. This is something that we were discussing in purely theoretical terms as a possibility and whether or not we could do it. Last year, they actually started building a school in Leeds, the Lawrence Calvert Academy, using this product platform-based approach, and DFE is committed to expanding the use of this product platform to deliver its portfolio of schools. So we've proved that we can take something from a concept to on-site delivery in 5 years, which is a very, very quick innovation cycle, and it's comparable better with the innovation cycle in most other industries. And then finally, another building, which just shows you that it's not just larger scale projects, that it's possible to embed the principles that we've set out in terms, and the policies that we've put in things like the construction playbook. The Foleshill Community Healthcare Centres in Leicestershire, it was designed at the outset to achieve outstanding environmental performance. They used a whole life carbon assessment in order to design the development of this. It's achieved the Passive House standard and a BREEAM excellence rating in terms of its energy performance. It was built using off-site manufacturing techniques and assembled on-site. The manufacturer had already developed a platform that they were then able to adapt in order to be able to deliver the building and improve its performance for the client. The cost of this project was £3 million, which was about 10% more than what the NHS would typically spend on a healthcare centre if it was built using traditional construction techniques. It's intended to have a 40-year life, and prior to the energy crisis, they estimated that after 19 years, because this building is so heat and energy efficient, it would be delivering a net return on investment, and over the life of the asset would be cheaper than a building that they produced in the traditional way. It also dramatically reduced the amount of on-site activity, and it will emit much lower levels of carbon over its life. So it's an example of a great sustainable building, and it shows you don't just have to have large projects, the HS2s or large schools and other buildings, in order to be able to adopt these principles and really to embed them in the delivery of programmes. So I will stop there. Thank you all for listening. I hope that was a useful introduction to government policy and some of the principles that we are going to be embedding in this going forwards. I don't think that those are going to change under this government or a future government, simply because we do have these statutory targets to achieve in relation to carbon, and we do have these imperatives around demographics and the need for productivity improvement that are going to keep us driving to improve the industry and realise some of the opportunities that we can see in front of us now. Thank you.